Big changes never arrive loudly. If you are waiting for a dramatic moment to know you have changed, you will miss it. That belief has shaped how people search for transformation. They look for collapse. They look for fireworks. They look for a clear before and after moment that splits life into two obvious halves. But real change does not announce itself that way. It does not kick the door open. It does not interrupt your life with noise. It does not demand witnesses. It moves quietly, so quietly that the part of you that loves certainty often ignores it. You expect change to feel powerful. You expect it to feel obvious. You expect to wake up one day and know without doubt that something major has happened. But the most irreversible shifts rarely feel important in the moment they begin. They feel small. They feel subtle. They feel almost disappointing. A conversation ends earlier than usual. A reaction does not rise when it normally would. An old trigger passes through you without landing. Nothing explodes. Nothing resolves. Nothing closes with a sense of victory. And because nothing dramatic happens, you assume nothing happened at all. That assumption is where most people lose track of their own evolution. You were taught to associate growth with intensity. Pain meant progress. Struggle meant movement. Clarity meant transformation. So when life grows quieter instead of louder, you start to doubt it. You think maybe you are stuck. Maybe you are regressing. Maybe you are losing motivation. Maybe you are settling. But what if the silence is not absence? What if it is evidence? Big changes rarely feel like breakthroughs at the beginning. They feel like disengagement. You stop arguing with the same ideas. You stop rehearsing old stories. You stop needing to prove what you already know internally. From the outside, this looks like nothing. From the inside, it feels unfamiliar. That unfamiliarity creates discomfort because the mind prefers visible motion. It prefers action that can be measured. It prefers signs that can be explained. Silence cannot be explained easily. Subtlety cannot be defended. So the mind waits for something louder. It waits for a moment that feels big enough to justify believing in the change. And while it waits, the change continues without permission. This is the paradox. The deeper the transformation, the less it asks for your attention. Surface changes need reinforcement. They need reminders. They need effort to maintain, but structural change does not behave that way. It reorganizes priorities instead of emotions. It alters what feels relevant. It removes options rather than adding excitement. That is why it often goes unnoticed. You do not feel stronger. You simply stop bending. You do not feel healed. You simply stop reopening the same wound. You do not feel enlightened. You simply lose interest in patterns that once defined you. No announcement, no milestone, no moment that says this is it. Just a quiet shift in what you tolerate, in what you engage with, in what you no longer chase. This is where people make a critical mistake. They assume that because the change feels small, it must be temporary. They assume that because it lacks intensity, it lacks significance. But permanence does not need intensity. Permanent change feels normal very quickly. That is the reason it is hard to recognize. The nervous system adapts. The mind adjusts its baseline. The new state begins to feel ordinary. And once something feels ordinary, you stop labeling it as transformation. You call it mood. You call it a phase. You call it coincidence. Yet if you try to return to the old way, something resists. Not forcefully, not emotionally. It just does not fit anymore. That resistance is not confusion. It is direction. The loud moments in life often feel important but fade. The quiet moments rarely feel important but last. A dramatic decision can be reversed. A subtle internal shift usually cannot. Once your perception changes, the old reality does not persuade you the same way. Once your tolerance changes, the old dynamics lose access. Once your internal reference point moves, the external world follows later. This delay is why people doubt themselves. They think nothing has changed because nothing around them looks different yet. But reality always lags behind identity. The internal shift happens first. The external confirmation comes later. If you wait for the confirmation before trusting the shift, you will stay stuck between timelines. You will keep checking. You will keep measuring. You will keep asking whether it is real. And in doing so, you stay oriented toward the old framework that required proof. Big changes never arrive loudly because they do not need agreement. They do not negotiate with your expectations. They do not perform for your certainty. They move when alignment is ready, not when attention is available. This is why the most important moments of your life often look unremarkable when they happen. You do not feel different enough. You do not feel transformed enough. You do not feel justified enough to believe in it. But later, when you look back, you realize there was no turning point. There was only a quiet crossing, a moment when you stopped waiting for permission, a moment when you did not go back, a moment when the old way lost its grip. Not because you fought it, but because you outgrew the need to. If you are waiting for a dramatic moment to know you have changed, you will miss it. Because by the time the change is loud enough to notice, it is already old. The real shift happens when nothing needs to be announced, and that silence is not emptiness. It is final. If your life feels strangely quiet lately, not peaceful, not chaotic, just different, this message is for you. Something has shifted. Even if you cannot point to what it is, the noise that once filled your days has softened. Not because your life suddenly improved, not because problems disappeared, but because your relationship to them changed. You wake up and nothing feels urgent in the way it used to. Tasks still exist, responsibilities still call, but the pressure behind them feels distant, like it belongs to another version of you. You are not calm. You are not anxious. You are simply less reactive. That state confuses people. Confusion arises because the mind is trained to read intensity as meaning. High emotion meant something mattered. Strong reactions meant something was alive. Urgency meant direction. So when urgency fades without resolution, the mind does not know how to interpret it. You wonder if you are losing passion. You wonder if you are disconnecting. You wonder if something is wrong, but nothing is wrong. This quiet does not feel like rest. It feels unfinished. It feels like standing between movements. That is why it is unsettling. You are not at peace, but you are no longer at war. You are not inspired, but you are no longer chasing. You are not fulfilled, but you are no longer empty in the same way. This in-between space is difficult to explain to people who have not been there. From the outside, your life looks unchanged. You still show up, you still function, you still move forward, but internally, something has loosened its grip. The narratives that once drove you no longer pull with the same force. The fears that once controlled your decisions now feel outdated. The rewards that once motivated you feel strangely flat. You have not replaced them with anything yet. That is the part that scares you. The mind prefers a clear exchange. Old desire gone, new desire installed. Old identity released, new identity claimed. But this transition does not work that way. First comes the quiet, then comes the gap, and the gap feels like nothing. You are not excited about the future the way you were taught to be. You are not desperate to fix the present either. You are simply observing yourself move through it. This observation creates distance. Distance creates silence. Silence creates doubt. You ask yourself questions you never needed to ask before. Why does this not matter anymore? Why am I not reacting the way I used to? Why do I feel detached but not numb? The answers do not arrive quickly. They arrive later when you realize the questions themselves have stopped. This quiet is not emptiness. It is deactivation. The systems that once ran your life automatically are powering down, not because you forced them to, but because they are no longer efficient. Old coping mechanisms, old ambitions, old defenses, they cannot operate in the same way anymore. So they withdraw. And when they withdraw, there is silence. This silence does not feel like relief because it was not earned through effort. It does not feel like victory because nothing was defeated. It simply appears. And because it appears, appears without explanation, you question its legitimacy. You wait for something to happen that will tell you how to feel about it. You wait for clarity. You wait for motivation. You wait for a sign that you are still moving forward. But this phase does not come with signs. It comes with absence. The absence of urgency, the absence of compulsion, the absence of the need to react immediately. This is why it feels unfamiliar. Your identity was built around engagement, around striving, around proving movement through visible effort. Now, effort is no longer the reference point. Presence is. You notice moments where you would normally rush, and you do not. You notice conversations where you would normally defend yourself, and you stay quiet. You notice situations that once drained you, and now they pass through without impact. You do not celebrate these moments. You barely notice them. That is how deep shifts begin. They do not demand recognition. They operate below the surface of personality. You might worry that you are becoming indifferent, but indifference is sharp. It is cold. It is dismissive. This quiet is not. This quiet is attentive. You still care. You just care without urgency. You still act. You just act without attachment to outcome. You still engage. You just no longer merge your identity with the result. This change is subtle enough to be mistaken for nothing. That is why this message is for you. If your life feels strangely quiet lately, not peaceful, not chaotic, just different, it does not mean you are lost. It means something fundamental has stopped fighting for control. The part of you that needed noise to feel alive is stepping aside. What remains has not learned how to speak yet, so it stays silent. This silence is not waiting for you to fix it. It is waiting for you to trust it, not to label it, not to explain it, not to rush it into meaning, just to notice it without panic. Because once you start demanding that it prove itself, you pull yourself back into the old pattern. The pattern of measuring, the pattern of forcing movement, the pattern of equating noise with progress. This phase cannot be rushed. It is not preparing you for something dramatic. It is not building toward a moment of explosion. It is simplifying you, removing unnecessary reactions, removing excess narratives, removing the constant internal commentary that once defined your sense of self. When that commentary fades, the world feels quieter, not because life changed, because the filter did. This is not something to announce. It is not something to explain to others. It is something to recognize internally. If you feel less compelled to perform your identity, if you feel less invested in being understood, if you feel less urgency to define what is happening, that is not disengagement. That is alignment beginning quietly. And if that description feels uncomfortably accurate, this message is for you, not to give you answers, but to let you know you are not imagining it. The quiet is real, and it is not the end of movement. It is the moment before direction becomes inevitable. Nothing is falling apart, but nothing excites you the same way anymore either. You do not panic. You do not celebrate. You just pause. That pause is unfamiliar. It is not caused by failure. It is not caused by loss. Nothing obvious went wrong. Your life still functions. Plans still exist. People still expect things from you. Yet the emotional charge behind it all has softened. What once pulled you forward now feels neutral. What once worried you no longer creates urgency. What once mattered deeply now matters quietly. This is not collapse. This is not relief. It is suspension. You move through your days without resistance, but also without excitement. You respond when needed, but you do not rush. You listen, but you do not absorb everything as personal. From the outside, nothing looks different. From the inside, the rhythm has changed. That change is difficult to name because it does not come with a clear emotion. There is no sadness to process. There is no joy to celebrate. There is no anger to release. So the mind keeps scanning. It looks for problems to solve. It looks for reasons to react. It looks for meaning in intensity, but intensity does not arrive. Instead, there is space, and space makes people uncomfortable. You were conditioned to measure life through feeling. A strong feeling meant direction. Weak feeling meant something was missing. So when feeling becomes even and steady, you assume something is wrong. You ask yourself questions quietly. Why does this not bother me anymore? Why do I feel disconnected but not empty? Why do I care less without becoming cold? These questions do not come from panic. They come from habit. Your system is used to fluctuation, high and low, hope and disappointment, drive and exhaustion. Now the swing has slowed. You are not at the top. You are not at the bottom. You are in the middle. The middle feels invisible. Nothing demands your attention. Nothing pulls you strongly enough to define your next move. So you pause. This pause is not indecision. It is recalibration. Your internal reference points are shifting. The things that once gave you identity no longer speak as loudly. The goals that once gave you structure no longer feel absolute. The roles you once played no longer feel necessary. But nothing new has replaced them yet. That gap creates uncertainty. Not dramatic uncertainty. Quiet uncertainty. The kind that sits beneath your thoughts and makes everything feel slightly muted. You still show up. You still do what needs to be done. You still function well enough that no one questions you. But you notice the difference. You notice that praise does not land the same way. You notice that criticism does not cut as deeply. You notice that outcomes do not define your mood as strongly as before. This neutrality can feel like loss if you are not expecting it. You might think you lost passion. You might think you lost ambition. You might think you lost your edge. But what you actually lost is attachment. Attachment to outcome, attachment to reaction, attachment to proving something through intensity. That loss does not come with fireworks. It comes with stillness. And stillness is often mistaken for emptiness. But emptiness feels hollow. This does not. This feels full but quiet. You are still present. You are still aware. You are just not being pulled in every direction anymore. That is why you pause. Not because you are unsure, but because you no longer need to move automatically. The automatic responses are fading. The reflex to react immediately. The reflex to explain yourself. The reflex to fill silence with effort. Those reflexes once protected you. They once kept you engaged. They once gave you a sense of control. Now they feel unnecessary. So they do not activate. And without them, there is space. That space feels strange because it has no script. There is no instruction for how to be here. No rule for how long it should last. No signal for what comes next. So you pause. This pause is not laziness. It is not avoidance. It is not giving up. It is listening without searching. You are not trying to fix anything. You are not trying to optimize anything. You are not trying to become someone else. You are simply allowing the absence of urgency to exist. That is harder than it sounds. Urgency gives direction. Urgency gives meaning. Urgency gives the illusion of importance. Without it, you must rely on something deeper. You must rely on internal alignment instead of external pressure. And alignment does not shout. It whispers so quietly that you only hear it when everything else stops. That is why this phase feels subtle. You are not breaking down. You are not breaking through. You are transitioning from reaction to choice, from momentum to intention, from identity built on doing to identity grounded in being. But because this transition does not come with a story, it feels undefined. People around you may not notice. They may think you are the same. They may even think you are less driven. But something is different. You are no longer pulled by the same forces. The old motivations still exist, but they do not control you. The old fears still appear, but they do not decide for you. The old patterns still knock, but you do not open the door automatically. That creates a pause between stimulus and response. That pause is power. It does not feel powerful yet. It feels neutral. But neutrality is where choice lives. When nothing excites you the same way anymore, it does not mean you lost your capacity for joy. It means joy is no longer tied to stimulation. When nothing scares you the same way anymore, it does not mean you stopped caring. It means fear is no longer driving the system. When you do not panic and you do not celebrate, you create space for something more stable. Clarity does not arrive with emotion. It arrives with calm recognition. It arrives when you realize you are no longer rushing to define what this is. You are letting it be what it is. A pause, not an ending, not a beginning, a suspension between versions. And that suspension is not empty. It is active in a way you cannot see yet. It is reorganizing priorities. It is dissolving outdated attachments. It is making room without forcing direction. If this feels familiar, it is because you are inside it. Nothing is falling apart, but nothing excites you the same way anymore either. That is not loss. That is the signal that something deeper is taking over. So you pause. And in that pause, something irreversible is quietly aligning. That pause is not confusion. It is your nervous system realizing the old reactions are no longer needed. For a long time, your body learned how to survive by responding quickly, react fast, interpret danger early, stay alert even when nothing is happening. Those reactions were not flaws. They were intelligence shaped by experience. Your system learned patterns. Tone meant threat. Silence meant rejection. Uncertainty meant danger. So it responded before you had time to think. Tight chest, shallow breath, immediate explanation, urgent movement. These reactions kept you functional. They kept you moving. They kept you protected. But protection has a cost. When a system stays in constant readiness, it cannot sense subtle change. It can only detect extremes. So life felt intense, high and low, push and pull. Now that intensity is fading, not because life became safer, but because your system learned something new. It learned that not every moment requires defense. It learned that stillness does not equal danger. It learned that silence does not always precede loss. This learning does not happen through thought. It happens through repetition, moments where nothing bad happened, moments where you did not react and survived, moments where you stayed present and nothing collapsed. Over time, the system adjusts. That adjustment feels like pause. The body stops rushing ahead of the moment. It stops flooding you with urgency. It stops demanding immediate response. And because you were used to urgency, the absence of it feels strange. You might think you are becoming disconnected. You might think you are losing sharpness. You might think you are drifting. But what is actually happening is regulation. The nervous system is recalibrating its baseline. It no longer treats every stimulus as a signal. It no longer amplifies every emotion. It no longer prepares for impact that does not arrive. So there is space between experience and reaction. That space is not confusion. It is choice becoming available. Before reaction happened first, then meaning, then reflection. Now awareness arrives first. You notice before you respond. You feel before you explain. You pause before you move. This shift is subtle, but it changes everything. Because reaction is automatic, awareness is intentional. Automatic reactions are shaped by the past. Intentional responses are shaped by the present. When the nervous system begins to trust the present moment, it loosens its grip on the past. That trust does not come from affirmations. It comes from lived evidence. Evidence that you can be here without collapsing. Evidence that you can feel without being overwhelmed. Evidence that you can pause without losing control. Each of these experiences teaches the system something new. So the alarms quiet down, not all at once, not dramatically, gradually. And gradual change is easy to miss. You may notice your breath stays deeper during moments that once tightened your chest. You may notice your thoughts slow when they used to race. You may notice you do not rush to fix or explain what feels uncomfortable. These are not signs of disengagement. They are signs of safety. Safety does not mean life is safe. It means your system feels capable of meeting what arises. That is a critical difference. When the system feels capable, it does not need to overreact. So the old reactions are retired, not because they were wrong, but because they are no longer efficient. Efficiency looks like calm. Calm looks like nothing is happening. And when nothing seems to be happening, the mind labels it confusion. But confusion is disorientation. This is orientation changing. Your internal map is updating. The landmarks that once guided you are fading. The routes you used automatically are no longer dominant. So there is a moment where you slow down, not because you are lost, but because you are no longer on autopilot. Autopilot kept you moving, but it also kept you repeating. Now repetition is losing momentum. The nervous system senses that repeating the same reactions does not produce safety anymore, so it releases them. Release feels like pause. This pause is not empty. It is active. Neural pathways are quieting. New patterns are stabilizing. Energy once spent on vigilance is becoming available for presence. Presence feels unfamiliar if you have lived in reaction. Presence feels slow. Presence feels neutral. Presence feels quiet. But presence is where integration happens. Integration does not announce itself. It settles. You may notice you no longer replay conversations as intensely. You may notice you no longer brace for outcomes that have not occurred. You may notice you recover faster when something does disturb you. These changes are not exciting. They are stabilizing, and stability is often mistaken for stagnation. But stagnation feels heavy. This feels light, even if it is subtle. The nervous system is learning that it does not have to earn rest through exhaustion. It does not have to earn calm through resolution. It can access regulation in the middle of uncertainty. That learning is profound. It changes how you relate to time. You stop rushing the future. You stop dragging the past. You exist more fully in what is happening now. So when you pause, it is not because you do not know what to do. It is because your system is checking in instead of reacting out. This check-in happens below language. That is why you cannot explain it easily. Language belongs to the mind. Regulation belongs to the body. The body does not narrate. It adjusts. And when it adjusts, it does so quietly. You may feel moments of boredom. You may feel moments of restlessness. You may feel moments where you expect something to happen and it does not. Those moments are the system testing its new baseline. Can I stay here without activating? Can I remain present without tension? Can I tolerate neutrality? Each time the answer is yes, the system settles further. This is not a phase to analyze. Analysis pulls you back into reaction. This is a phase to allow. Allowing does not mean doing nothing. It means not interfering with regulation, trusting that the body knows how to reorganize when given space. So when you pause, do not rush to name it. Do not force it into meaning. Do not push yourself to feel something stronger. The absence of old reactions is not a loss. It is an upgrade. Your system is realizing it no longer needs to live in anticipation of threat. That realization does not feel like relief at first. It feels like nothing. But nothing is happening because something important has finished. The old alarms have done their job, and now they are standing down. That pause is not confusion. It is the nervous system recognizing that the next version of you does not require the same defenses. And once those defenses release, movement will return. Not rushed, not reactive, directed. This is what a timeline shift looks like before reality rearranges itself. Not chaos, silence. Most people expect transformation to look like collapse. They expect disruption. They expect something to break so something new can appear. But that expectation comes from watching the surface of life, not the structure beneath it. Reality does not reorganize itself through noise. It reorganizes itself through withdrawal. Before anything external changes, energy pulls inward. Before circumstances move, attention detaches. Before a new direction becomes visible, the old one loses momentum. That loss of momentum is silent. Nothing crashes. Nothing ends dramatically. There is no clear signal that says something important is happening. That is why it is missed. A timeline shift does not begin with action. It begins with disengagement. You stop feeding certain thoughts. You stop reacting to certain dynamics. You stop investing energy where it no longer circulates back to you. This does not feel powerful. It feels uneventful. The mind looks for proof and finds none. The environment looks the same. The routines remain intact. So the mind assumes nothing is changing. But the field does not operate on appearances. It operates on alignment. When alignment changes, energy reorganizes quietly. A timeline is not a place. It is a pattern of choices, reactions, and expectations. Change the pattern, and the timeline shifts. But patterns do not shatter. They dissolve. Dissolution has no sound. This is why silence appears first. Silence is the absence of reinforcement. The old identity no longer receives the energy it needs to stay active. The old emotional loops are no longer fueled. The old future projections lose their charge. So they fade, not dramatically, gradually. That fading creates space. Space where nothing seems to be happening. That space is not emptiness. It is the gap between timelines. In that gap, the old reality has stopped responding, but the new one has not fully formed. So there is quiet. People misinterpret this quiet as stagnation. They think life has paused because they did something wrong. They think they lost momentum. They think they are wasting time. But time is not being wasted. Time is being reorganized. The field does not rush transitions. It waits for coherence. When your internal state no longer matches the old external pattern, the system pauses to recalibrate. That recalibration happens in silence because silence removes interference. Noise keeps patterns alive. Attention reinforces loops. Reaction feeds repetition. When reaction stops, repetition weakens. That is when timelines shift, not through force. Through non-participation, you are not pulled into the new timeline. You step out of the old one. And stepping out feels like nothing. There is no celebration, no relief, no sense of arrival, just a neutral space where old signals no longer command your response. This is uncomfortable for the mind. The mind wants movement. It wants feedback. It wants confirmation that something is happening. Silence offers none of that. Silence asks for trust. Trust that what is reorganizing does not need your interference. Trust that alignment precedes evidence. Trust that withdrawal is not regression. This trust is difficult because it contradicts everything you were taught about progress. You were taught to push, to strive, to create change through effort. But timeline shifts are not created through effort. They occur when effort becomes unnecessary. When the internal signal changes, the external structure must follow. But the structure lags. That lag is the silent phase. During this phase, nothing urges you forward. Nothing pulls you back. Nothing demands urgency. So you wait without knowing you are waiting. You live without feeling driven. This is the moment most people try to force something. They create drama. They chase stimulation. They provoke change. And by doing so, they reactivate the old timeline because the old timeline feeds on urgency. Silence starves it. So the field holds the silence until the old pattern fully releases. This release is subtle. You stop fantasizing about outcomes that once motivated you. You stop rehearsing scenarios that once caused anxiety. You stop narrating your life as intensely. The internal dialogue slows. When the dialogue slows, reality loses its grip because reality is shaped by what you consistently respond to. When response fades, reality loosens. This is why silence comes first, not chaos. Chaos is resistance. Silence is surrender. Surrender not to circumstance, but to alignment. You are no longer trying to make sense of everything. You are no longer trying to control direction. You are letting the system reorganize without instruction. This is uncomfortable because it removes the illusion of control. But control was never what moved you between timelines. Resonance did. When your internal state no longer resonates with the old environment, separation occurs naturally. No conflict, no collapse, just distance. That distance feels like quiet. You may notice you are less reactive to news, less invested in outcomes, less concerned with timelines and deadlines. This is not apathy. It is decoupling. Decoupling from a frequency that no longer matches you. Once decoupling stabilizes, the new pattern begins to assemble. But assembly also happens quietly. New interests appear without excitement. New directions feel obvious rather than thrilling. New opportunities feel neutral rather than charged. This neutrality confuses people. They expect desire to be loud, but loud desire belongs to lack. Aligned movement feels simple. It does not beg for attention. It does not create urgency. It just fits. So the timeline rearranges itself without announcement. One day, you realize your environment no longer reflects your old concerns. The conversations have shifted. The problems have changed. The context is different. But there was no moment when this happened. Only a period of silence that you did not know how to name. That silence was the transition. This is why people miss their own evolution. They look for drama and overlook disengagement. They look for clarity and overlook quiet knowing. They look for confirmation and overlook alignment. A timeline shift is not an event. It is a withdrawal of energy from one pattern and the natural formation of another. Silence marks that withdrawal. If you are in a phase where nothing is pushing you forward and nothing is pulling you back, you are not stuck. You are between patterns. If you feel less compelled to explain yourself, you are not losing direction. You are exiting a narrative that no longer requires defense. If life feels quieter without becoming empty, the field is reorganizing your position, not chaos. Silence. This silence is not asking you to act. It is asking you to stop interfering, because once the internal alignment is complete, reality does not need instruction. It rearranges itself automatically. The noise returns later, but it belongs to a different timeline, one that no longer needs to announce its arrival. That is why it feels uncomfortable. Your old identity wants proof. Your next identity does not need one. This tension is subtle, but constant. It does not feel like fear. It does not feel like doubt. It feels like something inside you waiting for permission that never arrives. One part of you keeps checking the environment, looking for confirmation, looking for results, looking for a sign that says this shift is real. That part learned to trust only what could be measured. Progress had to be visible. Change had to be validated. Growth had to be recognized. Without proof, it feels exposed. So it asks questions quietly. Is this actually working? Am I moving forward or just standing still? What if this pause means I am wrong? These questions do not come from logic. They come from identity. The old identity survived by tracking outcomes. It learned that safety came from evidence, from feedback, from knowing where it stood. So when evidence disappears, it becomes uneasy. Not because danger is present, but because control is absent. The next identity operates differently. It does not scan for reassurance. It does not rush to label progress. It does not need external alignment to feel internal certainty. It moves from resonance, not results. This creates friction. The old identity wants something to hold on to, a milestone, a breakthrough, a visible marker that says you are allowed to believe. The next identity does not negotiate with belief. It already moved. This difference creates discomfort because both identities are active at the same time. One is dissolving, the other is stabilizing, and the space between them feels unstable. You feel pulled in two directions. One direction says wait until it makes sense. The other says it already does. One direction says prove it. The other says trust it. Neither side is loud. That is why the discomfort feels strange. It is not panic. It is not urgency. It is internal disagreement. You might notice yourself wanting to explain what you are experiencing, but stopping halfway. You might notice yourself wanting to plan, but losing interest. You might notice yourself wanting reassurance, but not knowing what kind would even help. That confusion is not mental, it is structural. Your internal hierarchy is changing. The old identity was built around reaction, around adaptation, around reading the environment and adjusting accordingly. The next identity is built around coherence. It does not ask the environment who to be. It responds from alignment and lets the environment catch up. This reversal feels unsafe at first because it removes the familiar reference points. Before, movement came from pressure. Now, movement comes from clarity. Pressure is loud. Clarity is quiet. The old identity does not trust quiet. It equates quiet with stagnation. So it tries to recreate urgency. It reopens old questions. It revisits old doubts. It looks for problems to solve. Not because problems exist, but because activity feels safer than stillness. This is the tension, not between right and wrong, but between habit and evolution. The habit says stay alert. The evolution says stay present. The habit says check again. The evolution says nothing has changed. The habit says wait for proof. The evolution says proof follows alignment, not the other way around. This gap is uncomfortable because it cannot be resolved through thinking. You cannot reason your way into trust. You cannot analyze your way into certainty. The old identity keeps trying. The next identity does not participate. That non-participation feels like loss of control. You are used to managing your experience, tracking progress, correcting course. Now the system feels self-organizing, and that threatens the old role, so it resists quietly, not with fear, with questions that have no answers. How long will this last? What am I supposed to do? When will it be clear? But clarity is not coming yet, because clarity belongs to the next phase. This phase is about release. Release of the need to justify your inner shift. Release of the need to explain yourself to yourself. Release of the habit of waiting for permission. The old identity believes it must earn the right to move forward. The next identity moves forward and lets meaning follow. That difference is not philosophical. It is embodied. You feel it in the hesitation before acting, in the pause before speaking, in the lack of urgency where urgency used to live. This creates discomfort because the old identity interprets hesitation as weakness. But this hesitation is not weakness. It is discernment. You are no longer reacting automatically. You are checking alignment first. That takes time. The old identity does not like time. It likes momentum. Momentum made it feel alive. Now momentum is replaced by direction. Direction feels slower, but it is more precise. The discomfort you feel is the old identity losing authority. It cannot command you the way it used to. It can suggest, it can question, but it cannot drive. So it asks for proof. Proof that it is still relevant. Proof that it still matters. The next identity does not respond. Not out of defiance, out of certainty. It does not need to argue with what it has already outgrown. This is where many people turn back. They mistake discomfort for misalignment. They think if it feels uneasy, something must be wrong. But growth does not always feel expansive at first. Sometimes it feels like losing a familiar grip. The discomfort is not a warning. It is withdrawal. Withdrawal from an identity that required constant confirmation. You are not losing yourself. You are losing the need to constantly check who you are. That creates space. Space feels empty before it feels stable. The old identity does not trust empty space. The next identity is built inside it. So the tension remains until the old identity exhausts its need for proof. This happens gradually. Each time you do not rush to explain, each time you do not react to be seen, each time you do not chase reassurance, the old identity weakens. The next identity strengthens without effort. One day, the questions stop appearing. Not because they were answered, because they are no longer relevant. The discomfort fades without resolution. You realize you no longer need proof. Not because you found it, because you no longer require permission to trust your own alignment. That is when the tension resolves. Not with relief, with quiet confidence. The old identity wanted evidence. The next identity never asked for it. And once you cross that internal threshold, there is no going back. Because needing proof was never about truth. It was about fear of moving without validation. That fear dissolves quietly. And what remains does not argue. It moves. You respond slower. You explain less. You walk away earlier, not because you gave up, but because something in you is done repeating. At first, these changes feel almost accidental. You pause before replying to a message that once demanded an immediate answer. You read something that would normally pull you into debate, and you close it without comment. You sense a familiar dynamic forming, and instead of stepping in, you step aside. There is no anger in this, no disappointment, no sense of loss. Just a quiet decision not to enter. This is how small shifts reveal themselves. They do not announce growth. They reveal fatigue with patterns that no longer lead anywhere. You respond slower because speed is no longer protecting you. It is no longer proving anything. It is no longer necessary. You realize that urgency once came from habit, not importance. So you let the moment breathe. In that breath, you notice something new. Nothing falls apart when you do not rush. Nothing is lost when you do not immediately engage. Nothing bad happens when you take your time. That realization changes your behavior without effort. You explain less because explanation no longer brings relief. There was a time when being understood felt essential, when you needed to clarify your intentions, when you needed to justify your choices. Now the need has softened, not because you became indifferent, but because you trust your internal coherence more than external approval. You notice that most explanations were not for others. They were for your own reassurance. Once that reassurance becomes internal, the explanations fall away. You say what needs to be said, and then you stop. You do not fill the silence. You do not correct assumptions. You do not defend your position. Not because you are right, but because being right no longer matters enough to spend energy on it. This is not withdrawal. It is efficiency. You walk away earlier because you recognize the loop sooner. You have been here before. You know how this conversation ends. You know how this dynamic plays out. So you do not stay long enough to reenact it. Walking away earlier is not avoidance. Avoidance is driven by fear. This is driven by clarity. Clarity that repetition does not equal resolution. Clarity that some cycles close only when you stop participating. You do not announce your exit. You do not dramatize it. You simply do not continue. This is one of the clearest signs of internal change. The moment when you no longer need closure from the outside. Closure happens internally when you choose not to repeat the same response. You may notice this in small moments. A comment that once triggered explanation now receives a simple nod. A situation that once demanded justification now receives silence. A request that once felt obligatory now receives a calm no. These moments are quiet. They pass quickly, but together they signal something important. Your system has learned. It has learned which engagements drain energy without creating growth. It has learned which reactions keep you stuck in familiar roles. It has learned that not every invitation requires attendance. This learning does not feel like confidence at first. It feels like restraint. You hold back words that once came automatically. You hold back actions that once felt necessary. That restraint can feel uncomfortable. You might wonder if you are becoming distant. You might wonder if you are losing your edge. You might wonder if you are disengaging from life. But disengagement feels empty. This feels intentional. You are not pulling away from life. You are pulling away from repetition. Repetition of arguments that never resolve. repetition of roles that keep you small, repetition of emotional labor that produces no return. Something in you recognizes these patterns instantly now. That recognition creates choice. Before, the pattern ran you. Now you see it coming. Seeing it is enough to stop it. You do not need to fix it. You do not need to analyze it. You do not need to explain why you are stepping away. You just do. This is why these changes are easy to miss. They do not feel dramatic. They do not feel empowering in a loud way. They feel normal. That normality is the giveaway. When a shift becomes natural, it is already integrated. You no longer congratulate yourself for responding slower. You just do. You no longer question why you explain less. You simply stop mid-sentence. You no longer debate whether to walk away earlier. You already moved. These actions are not calculated. They are reflexive in a new direction. That is what makes them irreversible. You are not trying to be different. You already are. The part of you that needed to engage in order to feel alive has relaxed. The part of you that needed to respond in order to feel relevant has softened. The part of you that needed to stay until the end has learned that leaving is also an option. This is not giving up. Giving up comes from exhaustion. This comes from completion. Completion of lessons, completion of cycles, completion of identities built around reaction. You might notice fewer words coming out of you, but more precision. You might notice fewer emotional spikes, but more stability. You might notice fewer explanations, but clearer boundaries. This clarity does not require defense. It stands on its own. People around you may not comment on it. They may not notice at all, but you do. You feel the difference in your body. Less tension in conversations, less pressure to respond immediately, less internal noise after interactions. This is what alignment looks like in real time. Not excitement, not certainty, consistency. You consistently choose not to repeat what no longer fits. That consistency builds quietly. It builds through small decisions that feel almost insignificant, but those decisions accumulate. And one day you realize you are living differently, not because you planned to, but because repetition stopped making sense. You did not change who you are. You changed what you are willing to engage with. That change is subtle enough to escape attention, but strong enough to redirect your entire trajectory. You respond slower, you explain less, you walk away earlier. And when you notice yourself doing these things without effort, something clicks. This is not a phase. This is not avoidance. This is not indifference. This is discernment becoming automatic. Something in you is done repeating. And once repetition ends, a new pattern does not need to be forced. It emerges naturally, quietly, without asking for permission. This is not stagnation. This is calibration, like adjusting a compass before changing direction. Stagnation feels heavy. It feels like resistance. It feels like effort without movement. What you are experiencing does not feel like that. There is movement, but it is internal. There is activity, but it is quiet. There is change, but it is not visible yet. That difference matters. Stagnation drains energy. Calibration redistributes it. When something is stagnant, it presses against you. When something is calibrating, it pulls inward. You may feel less driven to act, but you feel more precise about what you do not want to act on. That precision is not accidental. Before any real change in direction, orientation must shift. A compass does not move the traveler. It aligns the traveler, and alignment happens while nothing appears to be happening. From the outside, calibration looks like waiting. From the inside, it feels like listening. Listening to signals that were drowned out before. Listening to internal cues that were ignored in favor of momentum. Listening to what feels coherent instead of what feels urgent. This listening creates stillness. Stillness is often misread as lack of ambition. But ambition without alignment leads to repetition. You have already experienced that. Movement without orientation takes you farther, not forward. So the system slows you down, not to stop you, but to reorient you. The discomfort you feel during this phase comes from comparison. You compare your current pace to your past speed. You compare your present quiet to your former intensity. You compare your inner state to what progress used to feel like. And because it does not match the old template, you label it stagnation. But templates expire. The template you used before was built for survival, for proving, for building structure. Now the task is different. The task is coherence. Coherence requires calibration. You cannot move coherently if your internal signals point in different directions. So the system pauses external motion while internal signals realign. This realignment is subtle. Values shift slightly. Priorities reorder quietly. Tolerance levels adjust. You notice you no longer want certain outcomes, but you are not sure what replaces them yet. That uncertainty is part of calibration. A compass must lose its old reference before it locks onto a new one. During that moment, the needle wavers. It does not spin wildly. It hesitates. That hesitation is not failure. It is adjustment. You may feel moments of boredom, moments of impatience, moments where you want something to happen just to break the quiet, but nothing needs to happen yet, because action taken before calibration completes leads you back to familiar territory. You have moved fast before. You have pushed through before. You have forced momentum before. You already know where that leads. This phase is different. You are not being asked to do more. You are being asked to aim differently. Aiming requires stillness. A compass cannot be calibrated while running. So your system slows you. It reduces unnecessary motion. It quiets emotional spikes. It limits engagement that scatters attention. This can feel like life has narrowed. In truth, it has focused. Focus feels restrictive when you are used to expansion through effort. But focus creates accuracy. Accuracy determines direction. Direction determines everything that follows. Calibration does not feel rewarding. There is no immediate payoff, no applause, no sense of accomplishment, because calibration is not about outcome. It is about orientation. You are learning what no longer aligns without needing to explain why. You are sensing when something is off without needing evidence. You are trusting subtle signals instead of loud incentives. This trust feels risky to the part of you that relied on certainty. But certainty is not available during recalibration. Only clarity. And clarity comes quietly. You might notice your standards changing. What once felt acceptable now feels draining. What once felt exciting now feels empty. What once felt necessary now feels optional. These are not random preferences. They are indicators. Indicators that your internal compass is shifting. If you ignore them and push forward anyway, the system will resist. Not as punishment, as protection. Calibration protects you from moving in the wrong direction with confidence. That is why it can feel frustrating. You want movement. The system wants accuracy. Accuracy comes first. This is where many people misinterpret the moment and rush to fix it. They fill the space with noise. They create goals. They chase stimulation. Anything to feel productive. But productivity without alignment is expensive. It costs energy. It costs time. It costs clarity. So the system insists on this pause, not as a delay, as a prerequisite. You may not feel motivated the way you used to. Motivation is often driven by lack. Calibration is driven by resonance. Resonance does not chase. It responds. You respond now instead of react. You wait for alignment instead of forcing outcome. This waiting feels passive to an old identity, but it is active internally. Neural pathways are updating. Emotional associations are shifting. Internal values are reorganizing. All of this requires space. Space feels like nothing from the outside. From the inside, it feels like something settling. You may find yourself thinking less about the future, not because you stopped caring, but because your sense of direction is no longer tied to projection. You are orienting in the present. This orientation stabilizes you. Once stabilized, movement returns naturally, not rushed, not desperate. Precise. A calibrated compass does not need constant correction. It simply points, and when you begin to move again, the effort feels lighter. Not because the path is easier, because the direction is true. So if your life feels slower, quieter, less dramatic, do not assume you are stuck. Assume you are recalibrating. Stagnation feels like pressure without progress. Calibration feels like stillness with purpose. One drains you, the other prepares you. Like adjusting a compass before changing direction, this moment matters more than it looks. Once alignment locks in, movement becomes inevitable. And it will not need force. It will need trust. Trust that the pause was not wasted time. It was orientation, and orientation determines the path long before the first step is taken. Small shifts do not feel powerful because they do not pull you backward anymore. They quietly remove the option. Power is often mistaken for intensity, for force, for moments that demand attention. But the most decisive changes rarely feel strong. They feel final, not because something dramatic happened, but because something subtle stopped happening. The urge to return fades. The temptation to revisit weakens. The option that once existed simply disappears. You do not announce this to yourself. You do not mark the moment. You just notice later that going back is no longer available. This is what makes small shifts irreversible. When change is loud, it invites reconsideration. When change is dramatic, it leaves room for doubt. When change is emotional, it can be undone. But when change removes an option quietly, there is nothing to argue with. You are not resisting the past. You are no longer oriented toward it. That difference matters. Resistance keeps a door open. Orientation closes it. At first, this feels underwhelming. You expect a sense of empowerment. You expect clarity. You expect relief. Instead, there is neutrality. You do not feel like you won anything. You do not feel like you overcame something. You simply cannot step into certain patterns anymore. The arguments that once pulled you in no longer register. The behaviors that once felt familiar now feel foreign. The environments that once felt normal now feel distant. Not wrong, just unreachable. This is how non-reversal works. It does not push you forward with force. It removes the gravity that pulled you backward. Gravity is felt only when it is there. When it disappears, movement feels lighter, but not dramatic. You walk without resistance and assume nothing changed, but something fundamental did. The option to return required internal alignment. That alignment is gone. You could try to recreate the old situation. You could revisit the same conversation. You could step back into the same role, but it would feel forced. Not painful, not terrifying, just incorrect. And incorrectness is powerful because it does not need emotion to enforce it. You do not argue with something that no longer fits. You simply do not choose it. This is why small shifts feel quiet. They do not convince you. They do not motivate you. They do not inspire you. They change what is available. Availability shapes behavior more than motivation ever could. When the old option disappears, the decision disappears with it. There is no struggle, no debate, just absence. You might notice this in moments that seem insignificant. A chance to explain yourself appears and you do not feel the impulse. An opportunity to re-engage shows up and you decline without thinking. A familiar pattern presents itself and you move past it without noticing. Later, you realize something. You did not choose differently. You could not choose the old way. That is the sign. Irreversible change does not ask for commitment. It removes alternatives. This can feel unsettling at first. The mind likes options. It likes flexibility. It likes the illusion of return. Even when return was painful, it felt safe. Safety came from familiarity, not comfort. So when familiarity dissolves quietly, the mind looks for it. It checks the old routes. It tests the old responses. It scans for the old feelings. and finds none. That absence can feel like loss, but it is not loss. Loss feels empty and charged. This feels neutral and stable. You are not missing what you cannot return to. You are no longer oriented toward it. Orientation is what makes return possible. Once orientation shifts, the past loses leverage. This is why these shifts do not feel powerful. Power suggests force. This is removal. Removal of loops. Removal of compulsions. Removal of internal negotiations. You are not stronger. You are simpler. Simplicity is often underestimated, but simplicity is what makes movement sustainable. When you are no longer pulled backward, forward movement does not need effort. It just happens quietly. You might worry that this means you stopped caring, but caring was never the issue. Attachment kept options alive that drained you. Attachment made repetition feel necessary. When attachment dissolves, options close, not with a slam, with a fade. This is why you do not celebrate these moments. There is nothing to celebrate. You did not achieve anything. You simply stopped repeating, and repetition was the only thing holding the door open. You might look back and try to identify when this happened. When did I stop wanting that? When did this lose its hold? There is no clear answer, because the shift did not happen in a moment. It happened in a series of small internal choices that felt insignificant. Choices not to engage, not to respond, not to invest. Each one removed a little energy from the old option, until one day, the option no longer existed. Not externally, internally. This is what makes it irreversible. You can recreate circumstances. You cannot recreate alignment. Once alignment moves, the old path is no longer accessible. You can stand near it, you can look at it, but you cannot walk it naturally anymore. This is why small shifts matter more than big decisions. Big decisions are often made in emotion. Emotion fades. Small shifts are made in awareness. Awareness integrates. Integration does not reverse. You may not feel proud of these changes. Pride belongs to effort. This was effortless. Effortless changes often feel undeserving of recognition, but they are the ones that last. They change your baseline. Your tolerance changes. Your patience changes. Your sense of what is acceptable changes. Once that baseline moves, you cannot go back without discomfort. Not because it is wrong, because it is no longer true for you. Truth does not argue. It simply excludes what no longer belongs. This exclusion is quiet. No explanation, no justification, just absence. This is why the shift feels small. There is no surge of energy. There is a lack of drag. You do not feel propelled forward. You feel unburdened. And unburdening does not feel like power at first. It feels like nothing is pulling. Only later do you realize how much effort went into resisting that pull before. Now there is nothing to resist. The option is gone. You might test it unconsciously. You might try to re-engage just to see, and you will feel it. Not pain, misalignment, like wearing a shape that no longer fits. You do not stay there. You do not need to convince yourself. You leave easily. That ease is the signal, not excitement, not certainty. Ease. Ease means the decision has already been made at a deeper level. Small shifts remove choices before you notice. That is why they are permanent. They do not ask you to be disciplined. They change what discipline is required for. They do not demand willpower. They reduce temptation. And when temptation disappears, so does the struggle. This is not dramatic. It is definitive. So if you feel like certain doors have quietly closed without ceremony, do not try to reopen them. Notice how little effort it takes to walk past. That is not indifference. That is alignment having moved on. Small shifts do not feel powerful because power would imply force. This is gravity leaving. And once gravity is gone, there is no backward, only forward without effort. Quietly, finally, if you no longer feel the urge to convince people you are changing, that is not doubt. That is alignment. The need to convince always comes from friction, from the gap between who you feel you are becoming and how you believe you are perceived. When that gap exists, energy moves outward. You explain, you justify, you announce progress before it has settled. Convincing is not communication, it is compensation. It appears when your internal state still depends on external acknowledgement. So when that urge disappears, something fundamental has shifted. You stop narrating your growth. You stop signaling transformation. You stop correcting how others see you. Not because you stopped caring, but because caring moved inward. Alignment does not seek witnesses. When you are aligned, your actions no longer need context. They stand on their own. Before, you wanted people to notice the difference. You wanted recognition for the effort it took to change. You wanted confirmation that the shift was real. That desire was understandable. Change was fragile then. It needed reinforcement. Now it does not. Now it holds its shape without support. So you let people misunderstand you. You let old labels linger. You let assumptions remain uncorrected. Not out of passivity, out of stability. Stability does not rush to explain itself. When alignment is present, explanation feels unnecessary. You notice this most in moments where you would have defended yourself before. Someone misreads your silence. Someone questions your direction. Someone references an older version of you, and you do not react. There is no spike of urgency, no impulse to clarify, no need to correct the record. You simply continue. That continuation is the sign. When doubt is present, you seek reassurance. When alignment is present, you allow time to reveal truth. Time does a better job than words ever could. The urge to convince is rooted in fear of being unseen, but alignment does not fear invisibility. It understands that being unseen temporarily is often the cost of real change. Visibility belongs to the old pattern. Consistency belongs to the new one. So you choose consistency. You show up differently without announcing it. You make choices quietly. You let results speak in their own timing. This can feel uncomfortable at first. You were trained to communicate progress, to share updates, to explain shifts. But alignment operates below language. It does not require explanation to exist. You may notice that when you do speak, your words are simpler, less emotional, less loaded. You say what is true, not what is persuasive. That is another sign. When you are trying to convince, language becomes performative. When you are aligned, language becomes precise. You no longer reach for phrases that sound evolved. You no longer frame your experience to be understood. You speak from where you are, and if that is not received, you let it pass. This is not resignation. It is trust. Trust that alignment does not need to be defended. People who are not aligned with you do not need convincing. People who are aligned will recognize you without explanation. The need to convince disappears when you stop negotiating your direction. Negotiation happens when you are still deciding. Alignment happens when the decision has already been made internally. You may still feel uncertainty about outcomes. You may still feel curiosity about what comes next. But you no longer question whether you are on the right path. That question fades quietly. Not because you found an answer, because the question lost relevance. You can feel this shift in how you relate to feedback. Praise does not inflate you. Criticism does not destabilize you. Both pass through without altering your course. That neutrality is often misunderstood. Others may think you became detached. They may think you are less engaged. But what actually happened is that your center of gravity moved. It moved from perception to coherence. Coherence feels steady. It does not swing with opinion. So you stop checking for approval. You stop scanning faces for recognition. You stop measuring reactions. Not because you are above it, because you are no longer oriented toward it. Orientation determines behavior more than intention. Once orientation shifts inward, external validation loses its leverage. This is why alignment feels quiet. There is no internal debate, no need to convince yourself or others. When you are out of alignment now, it feels immediate. Tightness, resistance, over-explanation. You notice these signals and adjust without drama. That self-correction happens automatically. Before, correction required reflection. Now, it requires awareness. This makes your movement feel smooth, not fast. Smooth. Smooth movement does not attract attention. It does not need to. It is efficient. You may notice that conversations change. You listen more than you speak. You respond rather than react. You leave without summarizing. This is not social withdrawal. It is selectivity. Selectivity is a byproduct of alignment. You invest energy where resonance exists. You withdraw energy where it does not. No explanation needed. If someone asks you to define what changed, you may struggle to answer. Not because nothing changed, because change happened at a level that language cannot capture easily. So you do not try, you let your presence communicate. Presence is more convincing than words. Words can be debated. Presence cannot. When alignment is real, it alters how people experience you, even if they cannot articulate why. They may not notice immediately, but something registers. Consistency over time does that. That is why the urge to convince fades. You trust time more than explanation. Time will show patterns. Time will reveal direction. Time will expose truth. Your role is not to persuade. Your role is to remain aligned. Alignment does not rush to be understood. It allows misunderstanding without collapse. This is one of the clearest signs you are on the right path. When misunderstanding no longer threatens your sense of self. When silence does not feel like erasure. When being unseen does not feel like failure. That stability comes from integration. You are no longer becoming. You are being. Being does not announce itself. It simply continues. So if you notice that you no longer feel the urge to convince people you are changing, pay attention. That urge only disappears when something has settled. Doubt creates noise. Alignment creates quiet. Doubt looks outward. Alignment stands inward. This quiet is not hesitation. It is grounded movement. You do not need anyone to agree for this to be real. You do not need recognition for it to continue. You do not need permission to stay aligned. The path does not require explanation. It requires consistency, and consistency does not need witnesses. It only needs you to keep walking. Real transformation does not announce itself. It settles in, and one day you realize the old life cannot reach you anymore. This is the part most people never notice while it is happening. There is no moment where you stand back and say, this is it. No clear line between before and after. No signal that tells you the shift is complete. It happens quietly through repetition that slowly changes form. You live your days. You make ordinary choices. You respond the way that now feels natural. Nothing feels extraordinary. That is why it lasts. Real transformation does not rely on intensity. It relies on integration. Integration feels uneventful. You do not feel like a new person. You feel like yourself without the strain. The effort you once carried dissolves. The vigilance softens. The internal commentary grows quieter. At first, this quiet feels unfamiliar. You were used to managing yourself, monitoring your reactions, correcting your thoughts. Now there is less to manage. The mind does not cling as tightly. The body does not brace as often. The emotional spikes level out. You do not celebrate this. You barely notice it. This is how transformation hides in plain sight. It does not feel like progress. It feels like normal. And because it feels normal, you do not question it. Until one day, something from the old life tries to reach you. A familiar dynamic, a familiar trigger, a familiar invitation to react the way you once did. And you cannot, not because you are resisting, because the connection is gone. The reaction does not activate. The story does not pull you in. The emotional hook does not land. You watch it pass by like something that belongs to another timeline. That is the moment you realize something is settled, not changed, settled, the difference matters. Change can be reversed. Settlement cannot. When something settles, it becomes the ground you stand on. You no longer remember how it felt to be constantly pulled. You no longer remember how much effort it took to stay afloat. You only notice the absence of urgency, the absence of internal negotiation, the absence of the need to return. The old life cannot reach you because you no longer respond to its signals. It can still exist around you. It can still speak. It can still move, but it cannot access you. Access is determined by resonance. When resonance changes, access ends. This does not feel dramatic. There is no sense of victory. You do not feel like you escaped something. You simply feel unavailable. Unavailable to patterns that once defined you. Unavailable to roles you once played automatically. Unavailable to emotional labor that once felt necessary. This unavailability is quiet. It does not require boundaries to be announced. It does not require explanations. It is enforced naturally by your nervous system. Your body knows what it no longer needs to engage with. That knowing is calm. Real transformation does not feel like expansion forever. At some point, it feels like containment, not restriction. Containment. Your energy stops leaking. You invest it where it matters without effort. You do not chase clarity. You move from it. You do not seek confirmation. You recognize alignment. And because of this, life stops testing you in the same ways. Not because challenges disappear, because the old tests no longer apply. The situations that once triggered, you lose relevance. They still happen, but they do not define your state. This is the quiet climax. The moment where nothing changes outwardly, but everything has shifted internally. You realize you are no longer negotiating with the past. You are no longer checking whether you might go back. The question does not arise. That question belonged to the old structure. Now there is only forward presence. Not ambition-driven, not forceful, stable. Stability is often mistaken for boredom, but boredom seeks stimulation. This state does not. It seeks coherence. Coherence feels subtle but grounded. You are not constantly adjusting yourself to fit the moment. You meet the moment from where you are. This meeting is effortless. The old life cannot reach you because you are no longer living from reaction. Reaction kept the connection alive. Awareness dissolves it. Awareness does not fight the past. It outgrows it. Outgrowing does not feel like departure. It feels like arrival. Arrival into a version of yourself that does not require constant maintenance. You do not have to remind yourself who you are. You do not have to reinforce your values. You do not have to protect your direction. It protects itself. This is what settling looks like. It is not excitement. It is not certainty. It is quiet confidence without language. You trust your internal signals without checking. You move when something aligns. You stop when it does not. No débat. This simplicity is the result of a long process that felt invisible while it unfolded. That is why people often underestimate their own transformation. They remember the struggle. They forget the integration. Integration is where the real change locks in. Once locked in, it does not loosen. You can visit the places you used to live internally, but you cannot stay. They feel thin, unstable, unnecessary. The old life cannot reach you because you no longer live at the same frequency. This is not superiority. It is incompatibility. Incompatibility is neutral. It does not judge. It does not compare. It simply does not connect. This is the quiet ending most people overlook. They expect fireworks, but real transformation does not announce itself. It settles into your nervous system. It settles into your choices. It settles into your pace. And one day, you notice that the things that once defined your life no longer have access to you. Not because you closed the door, because you moved so gradually that you did not feel it happen. So completely that there is no reason to go back. The old life cannot reach you anymore. And the most telling part is this: you are not trying to prove that it cannot. You simply keep living. From where you are now, quietly, stably, fully. That is the truth at the center of all lasting change. It does not demand recognition. It does not need a witness. It just remains, and nothing that belongs to the old structure can cross that line again, because the line is no longer something you guard. It is something you are. So if nothing dramatic is happening, good. If there is no collapse, no breakthrough moment, no story you can point to and say this is where everything changed, good. Because what is real does not need spectacle. Big changes never arrive loudly. They arrive final. Final does not mean sudden. It means settled. It means something has completed its work so thoroughly that it no longer asks for attention. You are not waiting for life to begin again. You are not standing at the edge of something unknown. You are already standing inside it. The absence of drama is not a lack of movement. It is the absence of resistance. When resistance ends, noise ends with it. This is the part people misunderstand. They think silence means delay. They think quiet means nothing is happening. But silence is what remains when the internal argument is over. You are no longer negotiating with yourself. You are no longer rehearsing explanations. You are no longer preparing for impact. You are living from a place that does not need to prove itself. That is why it feels uneventful. Events exist to signal change. But when change is complete internally, signals are unnecessary. Life does not need to shake you awake anymore. You are already awake to your own direction. So days feel ordinary. You wake up, you move through your routines, you make choices without commentary. Nothing announces itself, and that is the point signals are for those who are not aligned yet. Alignment does not need reminders. You may notice that you are no longer asking when things will shift. That question dissolves when you stop living in anticipation. Anticipation belongs to waiting. You are not waiting. You are inhabiting a version of yourself that does not feel new anymore. Just true. That truth does not sparkle. It grounds. Grounded things do not seek attention. They support weight. They hold structure. Your life is restructuring quietly around what you can now hold. You are not chasing intensity. You are not avoiding discomfort. You are choosing what fits and leaving what does not. Without ceremony, that is finality. Finality is not loud. Loud endings beg to be remembered. Quiet endings do not look back. You do not miss the old noise the way you thought you would. You may remember it, but it does not call you. There is no pull to return, no urge to recreate the old urgency. That absence is the clearest sign. If you had not changed, you would still be restless, still scanning, still waiting for something to happen. But restlessness requires misalignment, and misalignment has ended. So the system rests, not because everything is perfect, but because nothing inside you is arguing with reality anymore. This is where people get confused. They expect happiness. They expect excitement. They expect a reward. But rewards are for effort. This did not require effort. It required surrender. Surrender does not feel triumphant. It feels quiet. You let go of the need for proof. You let go of the need for permission. You let go of the need to explain your pace. And once you let go, there was nothing left to push against. So life stopped pushing. That mutual release is calm. Calm does not feel dramatic. It feels stable. You might worry that you are missing something. You are not. You are simply no longer chasing. Chasing was loud. Being is not. The biggest misconception about transformation is that it should feel extraordinary, but extraordinary experiences fade. What lasts is what becomes normal. Normal does not announce itself. It just continues. You may notice that your days are quieter but fuller, not filled with stimulation, filled with presence. Presence is subtle. It does not compete. It does not rush. It just remains. That remaining is what makes this final. There is no next version you are waiting to become. There is no future self you are trying to reach. You are here, and here does not need validation. If nothing dramatic is happening, good. Drama belongs to transition. You have already crossed. Crossings are invisible when you do not turn around. You are not standing between worlds anymore. You are standing in one. That is why nothing is pulling you back. That is why nothing is forcing you forward. You move because it makes sense, not because you are driven. Sense does not shout. Sense settles. This is why people who have truly changed often look unchanged. They are not trying to signal difference. They are living it. And living, it looks ordinary until someone from the old life tries to reach them, until an old pattern calls their name, and there is no response. Not because of strength, because of distance. Distance created quietly. Distance that no longer needs to be defended. That is final. Final does not mean finished with life. It means finished with repetition. Finished with loops that required energy but gave nothing back. Finished with identities that needed reinforcement. Finished with noise that disguised itself as movement. Now movement is clean. It goes where it belongs. And because it belongs, it does not rush. If you look for signs, you might miss it. If you wait for confirmation, you might doubt it. But if you simply notice your own steadiness, you will know. You do not feel pulled apart. You do not feel pushed to become. You feel intact. Intact people do not need drama. They do not need proof. They do not need arrival moments. They arrive quietly and they stay. So if nothing dramatic is happening, good. That means the work is done at the level that matters. Big changes never arrive loudly. They arrive final. And final does not echo, it settles. And once it settles, there is no reason to announce it. You just live from it, without explanation, without urgency, without going back. That is the destination, not a place. A state where nothing needs to happen anymore for you to know where you are. And that knowing is silent, because it is complete.